Good afternoon, everyone. Now that the county manager is seated, I'd like to call this 3 o'clock October the 10th council meeting to order. Good to see everyone. Councillor Columbus is on personal business today, and he will not be in attendance this evening. I suspect that Councillor Sonnenberg will be along. I'm not sure. Again, just to go through a few of the points for this evening, as always, remind everyone that we are web streamed and we are indeed televised. And if you have your cell phone, if you can just make sure it's not making a lot of noises, that would be very much appreciated. Judy Ann McCauley, again, is our volunteer. We'd like to thank Judy Ann McCauley for volunteering for this afternoon's meeting. I have no changes proposed for this evening's agenda. It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Geisens that the agenda be approved as presented. Any discussion? In favor? So we'll go as written. Thank you. It's carried. Thank you, Andrew. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare? And if you have one, if you would declare it at this time. None to declare, Mr. Clerk. Just looking at the agenda, I think it's pretty straightforward this evening. There are 4 items, applications under our public meeting hearings at 5 o'clock, 3 municipal drains and 1 planning application, and we will start with those at 5 o'clock. And until then, we should be able to saw off a pretty good piece of this agenda. There are 2 consent items before us. The first one is Staff Report 1738, an unrestricted deposit account transfer. Do you wish to give this, James? Andy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with consent items, there's no staff presentation.
No staff presentation. I wasn't sure. Thank you. And the second consent item is Staff Report 1757. It's a temporary road closure, sidewalk, and run for STEM cells. Do you want me to present the motion and then discussion? I shall do that. Councillor Height has moved. Councillor Oliver has seconded that our consent items A and B be approved as recommended as follows. And there is the unrestricted deposit account transfer. And further, that council direct our treasurer of Norfolk County to leave the balance of the unrestricted deposit account transfers in the opportunities and contingency reserve. And that Staff Report 1757, this is the special event, the Simcoe Walk and Run for Stem Cells, be received as information, and that council authorizes staff to approve the request from John Dirksen, the organizer of the Simcoe Walk and Run for Stem Cells, to temporarily close Kent Street in Simcoe from Yonge to Union Streets from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. on Sunday, October the 15th, 2017. Discussion on these 2 consent items. I hear none. Those in favor? It's carried. No presentations, no deputations this evening. We'll go then to page 15 to adopt and/or correct our council meeting minutes, which took place on September the 26th. Anything you wish to discuss or bring to our attention? If not, I'll declare those minutes adopted as they are printed. Councillor Wells, please.
Mayor, I had written down that I was going to speak to item number 30, but since we're going to talk about it later, I'll sit down. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to page 29 under Communications. We have a letter in our package on page 29 dated September the 21st, 2017. This is from John and Valerie Hanselman of Delhi, and this concerns the Delhi wastewater treatment plant. It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Geisens that the correspondence of John and Valerie Hanselman respecting the Delhi wastewater treatment plant be received as information. Discussion. Councillor Black.
I had to get some advice from my fellow colleague here, my senior. Yeah, I just wondered, Mayor Luke, would we be getting some sort of, maybe not necessarily a report or some information back? Because certainly I'm interested to know what's going on with a brand new plant, and maybe staff could respond, but also maybe provide us with a memo or an update or something just to let us know what's going on.
And just
okay.
before, if I may, and I recognize there's a motion, so I'm not speaking to the motion, but just for your information, Council, Mr. Hanselman approached me asking what can be done about his concerns of smell from the Delhi treatment plant, and I asked him to put it in writing and forward it to Council to be dealt with here, and that is why it is in the package. So you would like a response from staff, an update perhaps?
Well, at least a memo, just so council is, so knows exactly what's going on, if it is a problem or if there is a solution and so on and so forth.
Ms. Robinson, anything to add?
Through the Mayor to Council, I'd be happy to address that this evening for you. There is a history of complaints from this particular property owner with respect to that. Staff have been out, we have done numerous investigations, etc. We've never been able to have anyone else confirm the issue, even though we had people on site when some of the alleged incidences have occurred. We've spoken to adjacent residents. None of them have expressed any other concerns with respect to any odor, nor have we ever experienced odor. We were indicated that some of these complaints occurred at certain times, certain weather conditions. We sent staff out during those conditions to investigate and have not been able to find anything. We have been dealing with it for over a year. We advised the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. The same property owner, in fact, has advised the ministry. The ministry conducted an investigation into it and has not found a single incident of the county being out of compliance. We are doing everything in accordance with that, and there isn't anything further for county staff to do. The ministry has advised that they're satisfied with their investigation as well, and we're legally obligated to record any complaints that come in to any of our offices, and we have no record of a single complaint from anyone other than this particular property owner. And the ministry did testing on site and was unable to substantiate the claim as well.
Thank you,
I
Lee.
really appreciate that because it does seem odd to me. I think yourself and a number of councillors did have a tour of that facility, and at the time I didn't smell anything, and I know they were supposed to be addressing concerns with odor, and I believe they did, and I think we were even shown some of the equipment, and I thought it was state of the art, so it seems very odd to me that there would be any problems or concerns, and I'm glad to hear the report from Lee that suggests that I guess we don't. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, what I'm going to say is redundant now because Councillor Black has suggested that we do a report. I've heard from Ms. Robinson that a report is not necessary because what I was going to say is this is an issue that we have had at this council table before.
Yes.
I mean, it's not new. And so it was dealt with before, and I hear the same refrain that we heard before, and that is, as much as we want to find something or to help the constituent, they cannot find any reason to support his claim. And therefore, what would the report say? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further comments? There is a motion on the floor to receive this letter as information. Any other comments? Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you, and thank you, Lee. Sorry. Page 33, we have some more correspondence from Mark Lawson, a specialist with Union Gas, concerning the possible gas to be brought into a Turkey Point. It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Geisens that the correspondence of Mark Lawson respecting Union Gas, Turkey Point, be received as information. Any discussion on this? Councillor Wells, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to comment and say how pleased I am that we are kept in the loop and kept informed as to what's happening. So we have information. Sometimes these things happen and go on for months and months, and we never hear anything. But here we get, this is the second or third report that we have showing that they are actually still working on this project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You are quite correct, and I think the correspondence is, to me, important because it says that we anticipate this autumn this decision on possible funding. So that to me is key. Councillor Oliver, please, and then Brenton. I'm sorry? Gentlemen? Go ahead, Cal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I agree with my colleague. I was just going to ask Lee, I assume the staff that Union Gas are dealing with are primarily within Public Works and Environmental Services, i.e. Roads Department and perhaps Planning. But I remember Councillor Height made the very good suggestion of a simultaneous laying of fiber optic possibly at the same time that a gas line might go in. Do staff recall if Union Gas has chosen to involve any of the fiber optic service providers at this point in these early discussions, or is it premature for something like that?
Through the mayor to council, to the best of our knowledge, they have not been at that point where they're able to involve others in their discussions. We're still waiting for some final details from Union Gas with respect to their proposal. With respect to that, it is on staff's agenda to make sure that it's something that they actually consider at that time, but it's a little bit early at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Luke. A little bit, when I read the memo, I asked myself, like, did we jump the gun by, we gave up, what, 10 years of tax return on this particular application for Turkey Point? But when I read the memo, it says they're trying to extend natural gas to communities across Ontario, and then it refers to the natural gas grant program guidelines. Was there a grant applicable to our particular application? Do you recall? Or was it all simply us giving up to 10 years of tax?
Gribbs?
If I may, thank you. The Chair, the answer to your question, Councillor, is you'll recall that for Union Gas to apply for the Turkey Point project to the province, it had to have municipal backing, and the requirement was the municipality had to agree to forego 10 years of tax revenue. So that would be our contribution in kind, I guess you can call it. Money's foregone. So that was a necessary precursor to that application being made to the province of Ontario. And those are the terms of the deal.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, like, are all the communities operate under the same guidelines, or are they contributing to get gas? I'm sure there's other places in Ontario.
Well, you may well recall that the representative of Union Gas was present. He did indicate that this is not the only the project for which Union Gas was backing, and there are competitors elsewhere in the province and in the industry. But for projects to go forward to the province to qualify for, they had to have municipal backing, and that was the form for it to take. So in Norfolk, the project, the only proposal of which staff is aware, please correct me if I'm wrong, but was this one by Union Gas to serve the Turkey Point area, and Council did endorse the foregoing 10 years of property tax on the pipe infrastructure, should that go forward.
I'm not faulting what we did. I'm just really I guess maybe it's time to read the program guidelines just to see how, if there's other municipalities out there, what they're doing to entice Union Gas to put gas in their areas. I'd like to know that versus we gave up to 10 years, but what are other communities doing? I'd be interested to know because there are other areas in Norfolk that don't have gas.
That's true, but for this specific type of project that the province was inviting applications for, any project that was going to be endorsed by any municipality had the same, some would go farther than 10 years. You'll recall, in fact, staff suggested maybe you council consider more than 10 years, and council decided that 10 years was appropriate. So I can't tell you there are other municipalities that have endorsed more, but Norfolk endorsed 10 years, and everyone that did go forward endorsed some amount of time, 10 years or greater.
So that was kind of the guideline. I guess what I'm saying is there had to be some form of financial contribution by a municipality, be it exemption in taxes or whatever. There must have been other methods, correct?
No, as I recall, and as I understand how this project has worked throughout the province of Ontario, so that it could be apples to apples, the municipal contributions that were sought and asked for were all, they might vary in the number of years. Some municipality might have gone with 20
Right.
years, but they all work the same way, so it's all foregone future revenue.
Okay, taxes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything further on the motion? Motion to receive as information. Those in favor? Carried. Okay, on to section 9 of our agenda. These are the reports of committees. We'll start on page 35. It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Geisens that the minutes of the council and committee meeting be approved as presented with the exception of resolution number 6, which is pulled for discussion. Any discussion on items except resolution 6? Hearing none. Those in favor? Carried. We'll go to resolution 6 now. It's printed on page 38. I have a mover, Councillor Oliver. I do not have a seconder to put this on the floor. Councillor Height. Thank you, sir. Moved by Oliver, seconded by Height, that staff report 1726, homelessness prevention program review, implementation be received as information, and that council approves the implementation of the coordinated entry and homelessness prevention system as described in the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative Program Review Report and Staff Report 1726, and further that council approves the addition of up to 8 FTEs for the Social Service and Housing Division to create a homelessness prevention team to directly deliver the coordinated entry and homelessness prevention system with all associated costs to be paid for from the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative provincial funding to be phased into the division by the end of 2018-2019 fiscal year with annual reporting to council to confirm continued 100% provincial funding and budget apportionment for staffing and client support. And finally, further, that council authorize staff to notify current agency partners of the implementation plan and serve notice of any changes to contractual agreements in accordance with provisions of such agreements. Discussion. Councillor Wells, please.
A question, Mr. Mayor, on this motion. I wondered if there's a possibility that we could defer this motion until Councillor Sonnenberg comes, and my rationale being that Councillor Sonnenberg is a member of the Health and Social Services Committee, and his input might be very important. That would be my request, but you'll have to deal with it, Mr. Mayor.
Well, you can defer the motion with a motion for deferral. When you want to do that, let me know if you do.
I'd like to do that now, that we defer this until Councillor Sonnenberg is in attendance.
Okay. I have a motion to defer this until Councillor Sonnenberg is in attendance. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Black? I do not know. I haven't been notified by him, so do you know if he's coming, Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, he missed the earlier bylaw appeals committee as he had to attend a funeral. So I'm not certain, we haven't had any word respecting this meeting.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support my colleague's motion for deferral. Basically, at worst-case scenario, it would be a 2-week deferral. I suspect I will get feedback from staff, perhaps, as to whether or not that creates a major problem for us in terms of timing, but his input as a member of that committee probably would be helpful. But I do want to hear what staff have to say, but at this point, I'll support that motion for deferral if you'll allow them to comment.
We're speaking to the deferral. Councillor Geisens, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting the motion. I'm not in favor of hiring 8 people, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I don't mean to be rude.
All right.
You are speaking to the deferral.
Okay, well, I am not supporting the deferral.
Okay, continue.
Thank you. I think we need to go forward with this, and rather than wait for a colleague, who knows, well, he'll be here in a week or 2 weeks. We're not sure of that. So to me, I think we need to deal with it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Geisens. Back to you, Councillor Wells.
If that's the situation, Mr. Mayor, could we defer it for 1 hour? And if if Councillor Sonnenberg is not here within an hour, we will deal with the motion tonight. I don't have any problem dealing with it. I just don't want to, after we finish and make a decision, then say we should have done something differently. And we are a council of 9, and right now 2 of the council members are not here. This is a pretty important decision that we're about to make. And surely we can wait for an hour and still get it in today's meeting.
No, I'm just waiting to see the wording because I think initially your motion to defer was until Councillor Sonnenberg shows up, and that could be this evening, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 4. I mean, respectfully, who seconded that? Seconded it. Yeah, I knew. So the motion to defer reads like this: Wells moved, Black seconded. That resolution number 6 deferred until such time as Councillor Sonnenberg is in attendance. So based on that wording, if he appears before the confirming bylaw, I would say that we will deal with this resolution. Is that fair? And if it's not this evening, i.e. doesn't appear, then it would have to be 2 weeks hence. Would that be in order? You're fine with that? Mr. Black, Councillor Black? Okay. To the deferral only. Councillor Height, please.
Mayor Luke, we have quorum here, do we not?
Yes, sir, we do.
So I don't see why we're not having the discussion right now. Understand, should we wait for Councillor Columbus too? We start doing this, we might not get any business done. There's still enough of us at the table to have a good discussion, I think, and I think it should be moved on right now. Thank you.
I think I know how you'll be voting. We shall see. Anyone else on the deferral? Okay, we do have a motion to defer this until such time as Councillor Sonnenberg is in attendance. Those in favor of deferral? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 2, 3, 4. Motion is defeated. So we will proceed then with the motion that I read. It is printed again, as you're well aware, on page 38, Resolution 6. Discussion, Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a great deal to say. We had a good discussion last week on this at Council in Committee, and after hearing the presentation from the Manager of Social Services and Housing, I felt it was the right decision for us to make with the changes to the motion that Council will recall we added. And I put some of those recommended changes forward because I felt it was necessary to give us as Council and to give our constituents, i.e. the public, assurances that if we do in fact create these new positions to manage in a professional way this program, that we feel has perhaps not been achieving the greatest benefit for those who are served by the program up until the present time, it will ensure that our local municipal taxpayers are not going to have to contribute, number one, financially to it. It's being funded 100% by the province, and I feel the motion ensures that that will continue to be the case, or council will be within its mandate and prerogative at that time to change or to remove its willingness to manage the program. And the other thing that I know we had some concern about was what percentage of the total funding was being provided for services to those in need of the services, and what percentage would be required to fund these new staff positions. And I say new in parentheses because, of course, the service providers up until now and even today have staff positions that are being funded by that same funding. This would bring those positions under our umbrella, under our professional management, and hopefully achieving better results. So after all of that discussion last week, I was comfortable with having my name as seconder on that motion, and I'm comfortable with having my name as the mover tonight, Mr. Mayor, to see this program go ahead. I know my colleagues have concerns about it. All of us have concerns about creating new positions, especially in light of our discussion a couple of weeks ago about hiring freezes. And I have to take blame for that along with everybody else. But I do see this as a different scenario than some of the other situations we've dealt with. So I will be supporting the motion. Mr. Mayor, to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Councillor Black?
I too will be supporting it. Supported it last week, and yeah, I did speak to the motion. Once again, as Councillor Oliver has indicated, and the motion also indicates, it is provincial money, and I know some people will say, well, it's tax dollars no matter whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal, but I look at it from the point of view, it's their mandate, the province's mandate. I do know there is a problem with homelessness, and this is addressing a need. And that is why we are here, the province is here, is to address the social concerns of our society. And it might be funny in a way, now that I have white hair, I think I'm a little bit more sympathetic to people like this. And I think I mentioned last week, you know, I purchased a business in downtown Simcoe in 1979, a coin-operated laundromat. And I had a lot of the homeless people coming there at that time, and I tried to help them out once in a while, give them some money, or even buy them some Kentucky Fried Chicken or something like that. But I've seen this problem, mostly it's very visible in the downtown, and that there is an identifiable need. And I think when you get, I think it's true, maybe people don't see the end results quick enough, but once you get people off the street, into housing, and with support, you have to give these people some support to help bring them up and become part of society. And when you bring these people up, you elevate all of society in my mind. So it's one of the reasons why I'm supporting this, because I think collectively it's something that we need and should be doing.
Thank you. Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I won't be supporting this for several reasons. One of which is we have a contractor who does this job now. And okay, they're not living up to our expectations. But that's something that we as a group should work with them to get to those expectations. I don't feel right that we're pulling the rug out from underneath the Salvation Army by pulling those positions away from them. They have that duty and that responsibility, and that is taxpayer funded. They're a good organization. Maybe they just need some tweaking and some backing, some support to get that job done. Okay, so you know that's one of the biggest reasons, right? We could have went one of the other things, instead of hiring somebody for eternity, we could have set it as a 2-year contract to see how it goes, or a 1-year contract just to come back to council and see how the results were. Because what if we move forward and we have those same results that we had before? maybe there isn't enough homeless people to spend the $1.6 million in Norfolk County. I'm sure we'd find a way, but, you know, and then when I read that report, Mr. Mayor, we didn't know how many homeless there were, and I know that staff mentioned part of this would be collecting that information, but the biggest point that was made was we need affordable housing. And when I do the math on this, this is 206 apartments at $650 a month every single year we're going to spend. What's better, you know? So there's that, and okay, this is the province's money, we say. It's still coming out of the same pocket. So, you know, if we're getting good service from our provider, that's all we need. We don't need to start plugging in people into desks that need phones, and then there's kilometers and training and all of these other allowances that add up, and, you know, I think it's better that we contract this position out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. You know, we had a good discussion at the advisory committee. We had a good discussion here last week. I must admit, I pondered this whole thing for a whole week now and thought about it. And I remember doing the math, and I think it's $600,000 roughly for salaries, $900,000 of the total 1.5 roundabout is basically for housing. I found it very difficult to employ 8 people to spend $900,000. And I asked myself, is there not a better way? And I don't know if we've really explored that well enough to say, okay, Councillor Hyatt hit it on the head, Inwell, they provide this program. I did some of the math on that. I think Heidi mentioned $70 a night for 5 rooms at Inwell. And 365 days out of the year, well, it doesn't add up if you looked at the figures that we were presented with in the math side of things. I guess I wonder if we did an RFP to find out, I mean, it's going to be 3 years. She mentioned the increase in the CHIPPY program next year. 2018, 2019. I think there were two other major increases in that budget from the province. And whether it's provincial money or what, we're all the same taxpayers. But I guess I'm having a hard time employing 8 people to spend $900,000. That's what's really starting to bother me. And for one, maybe that is the only option, is to hire the 8 people, but I would love to see an RFP where somebody could come in and say, hey, I can provide that program. I mean, I don't want to give the money back, but I got to tell you, some days I like to say to the province, keep the money, give it to us for other reasons. However, I've wrestled with it for a week, Mayor Luke, and we'll wait and see where the discussion goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brunton. Just before I continue, Councillor Sonnenberg, welcome. Good to see you. Do you have any pecuniary interest to declare on tonight's agenda? And just to bring you up to speed, we are on page 36 of the hard copy agenda. These are the council and committee minutes from last Tuesday. Everything has been passed, and we are except item 6. And you will find resolution 6 on page 38. And we have a motion on the floor by Oliver and Height to approve resolution 6 as printed, and we're in the middle of discussion at this point. Any other discussion? Oliver and Black?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one very small point, and I didn't bring it up earlier, but I will just ask staff to reaffirm my understanding. When we added the words in the top of page 39 portion of the motion, further that council approves the addition of up to 8 FTEs, the reason for that wording was, I recall staff said the 8th position, which was going to be the administrative assistant type position, was one where staff at this point are not sure whether we will or will not need that, and whether it would be a full-time or a part-time. I just want to reaffirm, Mr. Mayor, if I could, that staff will come back to council for further approval before that position is actually filled.
Ms. Van Dyke, do you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Oliver. Yes, that is correct. We will do that. And if I could also just confirm that when we're talking about supports to vulnerable people, 4 out of the 7, if we're taking out the program administrator, that we would come back for further consent, 4 out of the 7 that we are requesting provide direct service to people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So that means providing counseling, providing support, walking alongside those folks in order to navigate the system to obtain and retain affordable, safe housing.
Anything further, Councillor Oliver? Thank you very much. Councillor Black, then Geisens.
I know last week when we had the deputation by Lee Logan from Indwell, I did ask her, asked her if she had read the report. She said, yes, they had read the report. And I said, well, what is your opinion on option A, option B? And she distinctly, I'm pretty sure I heard her say that she would choose the option that we are debating here this evening. So from the private sector or nonprofit sector, they're endorsing it. I'm glad to hear what Heidi has just said. What I said earlier, these people need assistance. They need a place to live, to have a stable lifestyle, and they need help, and they will be getting direct help, as Heidi has just indicated. And could I request a recorded vote?
Thank you. Councillor Geisens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting it. It's not that I don't want to help the people that need it. What I suggest is that we should be able to find another way to do what our staff are telling us that we should be doing. We should, I agree with what Councillor Brunton has said, that we should look at an RFP to see if we can find somebody. I think they can probably do it cheaper than we can at the county. And that's basically, you know, last year I think there was money that we didn't all spend out. Now we're going to have 8 people that we're going to pay, and whether it's 500,000 or 600,000, well, how much more are we going to be able to do than what we did last year? So theoretically, I can't see that we are going to have more people in housing or whatever with spending probably about the same amount that was spent this past year. Can we not work with the Salvation Army or anybody else that's out there that would be interested in taking this on? And to me, that is where it should be, Mr. Mayor. And I will not support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Sonnenberg, my apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I always have trouble when we're hiring coordinators or administrators, you know, people with lofty titles. We need boots on the ground caseworkers. Are we hiring these kind of people, caseworkers, hands-on type employees?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Sonnenberg, the intake worker, the emergency shelter worker, the 2 housing support workers, and the Housing Stability Bank administrator, or the landlord mediation, those are all frontline positions that will be providing direct service to clients. The program manager or the team leader is necessary in order to provide the supervision and support to those staff. When we're working with vulnerable people, it's very important that they are supervised properly and that they are given leadership so that they stay safe and so that we ensure that people are getting the excellent customer service that they deserve. The position, the data analysis coordinator, the program evaluator, as we had talked about last week, that position is really essential to working on our homelessness enumeration project, taking a lead on that project, and maintaining that by name list of people who are experiencing homelessness in Haldimand and Norfolk. And the enumeration project is a mandated project from the Ministry of Housing.
Thank you.
Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Question through you to Heidi. Heidi, why did the Salvation Army, I believe Dunville, was it not, that underspent substantially? What was the reason? I don't recall.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Brunton, there has been underspending in the CHIPPY program since the first year that we have had it. It has been in the area of homelessness prevention, and so staff have previously reported in public reports that that has been in the Rent and Utilities Bank program. So that's in the payments to clients for things like last month's rent, utility arrears, and utility hookups. And we have been working with all of our service delivery partners very diligently to make sure that program goals are being met and that money is being spent.
But the problem is they could not get housing, or they weren't, the Salvation Army were not, they paid the bills, did they not?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Brunton, in the Rent and Utilities Bank, people apply for funding for the things that I mentioned, and the money is given to them to pay last month's rent and utility hookups and that sort of thing. Part of the challenge has been that we have a challenge with affordable housing in Haldimand and Norfolk. But also part of that is that we are working with more and more people who need support to find that housing and who need support to work with their landlords and keep that housing. And that's what the system that we're proposing does.
Well, I guess I'm starting to wonder, like, regardless of how many people we employ in managing the problem, if the housing availability is not out there, we're going to have the same problem. We're going to have all the management we want, but we need the housing, is what you're telling me.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Brunton, that is certainly part of it. And as we have talked about around this table, we have other programs in housing, such as rent geared to income housing, the housing allowances, the rent supplements, the new construction of affordable housing that is funded through our affordable housing funding from the federal and provincial governments that we use to help increase affordability for people either in our public housing or in the private market. This funding we cannot use to construct new affordable housing, and we cannot use it for housing allowances and rent supplements. The program guidelines for the homelessness prevention funding say that we cannot use it for those programs because those programs are funded through the affordable housing pot of money. So I'm just not able to take CHIPPY funding and create 30 more housing allowances or 300 more housing allowances. We maximize our affordable housing funding to create new affordable housing through the things that I mentioned. And then the CHIPPY funding, we are proposing this system, which we believe very strongly is the best system, and it's evidence-based with the Housing First philosophy in order to support people to find that housing. And having it delivered in-house means that it will be easier. It's a one-stop shop for people to be able to access all of the programs that we deliver.
So based on what you've said, we don't actually look for housing for these people. It's up to them. You try to finance them to look for their own housing. That's the way you described it to me.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Brunton, right now, people are by and large finding their own housing, unless they have family or friends or a mental health support worker or a domestic violence worker that is supporting them. But most people are having to find their own housing. And if you are a vulnerable person who experiences challenges, that can be a very difficult and overwhelming task.
I realize that, I'm not saying I don't support the program. I guess I'm trying to get to the root of the problem, and I guess what you're telling me, a lot of this money is going to go to individuals to help pay some of their bills on affordable housing. And I guess when I look at that, I still question the number of people we have to hire to provide that service. And I apologize if I'm maybe not explaining that clearly, but we do have a social assistance program where we somewhat do the same thing, do we not?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Brunton, in Ontario Works, I think you're referring to Ontario Works, our case managers, their primary responsibility is to determine eligibility for Ontario Works assistance initially and on an ongoing basis. They provide referrals, but they're not doing the same type of intensive case management as the housing support workers and the intake worker and the landlord mediation worker that the housing workers would do. They just, with a caseload of in the high 80s, low 90s, they just don't have the capacity to do that type of intensive case management with each of their clients. And that's it. While we would like it to be within the mandate of Ontario Works, really the mandate of Ontario Works is to determine initial and ongoing financial eligibility for the program and support to become employed, to become financially independent. So we do have some employment-related staff who work with people on finding jobs and keeping jobs. And what we're proposing in housing is that this would be a parallel program, but on the housing side.
Okay, and I guess going back to my original idea, if we RFP'd this and asked for the number of supervisors versus the actual money that would go out to provide the program, if I can use those words, it may be substantially different than what we're seeing here. We're talking $600,000 for staffing, $900,000, rough figures again, for the program. If we ask for that in an RFP, we might see a bigger amount of money than the $900,000 going into the program versus staffing. Is that not possible?
I'm going to refer that to the county
Mr.
manager.
Cribbs, thank you, Heidi. Mr. Cribbs, please.
Councillor Brunton will recall, and while we can't get into the specifics of the in-camera discussion, Council has been informed that it is staff's opinion that there is no, I repeat, no potential third party prepared to or capable of offering the service, and that an RFP would yield no bids that could qualify to provide the service throughout Norfolk County.
How do we know that if we haven't tried?
I'm sorry, you'll have to turn your mind back to the in-camera session you had at the advisory committee, or the in-camera session you had last week, or the written reports. But you have been provided with this information.
But I had no time. I read the report. I read it a couple of times. I didn't see any place where we had looked for an RFP to see. I mean, we know Inwell does it.
You have the option, if you so wish, to bring a motion to go in camera, to hold the discussion, to ask questions pertaining to last week's in-camera discussion. Barring that, I will simply ask you to turn your mind back to previous discussions.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, the motion is, Resolution 6 is in front of you. It has been moved and seconded. There's no further discussion, Mr. Clerk, for recorded vote. Oops, sorry. Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Councillor Oliver.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens. No. Councillor Height.
No.
Councillor Sonnenberg. Yes. Councillor Wells. No. Councillor Black. Yes. Councillor Brunton. No. Mayor Luke.
Yes.
The item loses on a tie.
Okay, so the motion is defeated. Thank you. I will now go on to committee report. Yes, sorry, Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given what happened, don't we have to have some further decision made this evening to provide direction to staff so that we can continue with this process? It seems to me we do. Maybe Ms. Miranda or Heidi would provide a response, but I'd hate to see this just left now, Mr. Mayor, because if it is, we've got existing contracts that we know are coming up to their termination date. We've just dealt with Plan A. We don't have a Plan B yet, so that's my concern.
I thank you, Councillor Oliver. My thoughts are, since this motion now is defeated, would we not be sort of proceeding with business as usual as we have in the past?
Mr. Mayor, through you to council, Councillor Oliver is correct. We have an existing contract that is coming up to a termination March 31st, 2018. That is the end date. We would respectfully request council's direction on how to move forward with implementing our coordinated entry system for the homelessness prevention program. Staff did provide 2 options to council in the report. So we would be seeking direction and confirmation from council to move forward with an RFP if that's what council so wishes.
Would it be appropriate to have you bring something back? I mean, I don't have a copy of those options in front of me. They're in my office, but wouldn't it make sense to have you come back to council with the options?
We could do that, certainly, Mr. Mayor. We are also on a bit of a time crunch because we're heading into the end of October. We would need adequate time to work with our colleagues in purchasing to write and issue and evaluate an RFP before our year end. And we do have, as council is aware, and we've talked about, we do have some underspending in this program for this year, and we would like to address that issue right away.
Are you able to have us address that verbally here tonight?
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could request or suggest some wording,
I'm certainly willing to hear your suggestion.
I have heard some councillors indicate that they would like to see an RFP. So, option 2 in the report. I would suggest that the wording could be that staff be directed that using 100% provincially funded CHIPI dollars to commence the request for proposal process to completely outsource the coordinated entry system, including the positions of intake worker, emergency housing program worker, 2 housing support workers, housing stability bank administrator and outreach worker, and data analyst.
You'll need that in writing. Unless you want to hand it to you or I'll write it out. We'll wait because we'll need it in writing. Thank you. Thanks, Marlene. Thank you. Well, we're waiting for our clerk to write that out for you to consider as a motion. Heidi, a question from me. If this is a motion that we approve and then you'll put out an RFP, where will we be? How long will an RFP take if we get no takers? and we don't know until we put it out. I'm not suggesting we don't. Where are we going to be? You say we're in a tight timeline here. Are we in a six-week process?
I'm looking across chambers to Ms. Darlington. We would, in the housing side, we would prioritize this. We do have, we are working on other projects such as the construction of new affordable housing. We would prioritize it. But I would defer to Ms. Darlington to give some suggestion on how long that process might take.
Thank you.
Through the mayor to council, I would suspect that we're looking at a good 10-week turnaround period. We will want it in the marketplace for sufficient time to allow for bidders, and then we need to free up schedules for the evaluation process to take place and reporting back to council. So this again, as Ms. Van Dyke has said, we'll have to reprioritize other files in our office to make this a priority because we have a specific deadline and target that we need to meet. So another file, and we'll have to do some shuffling around.
I know there's no motion, but go ahead, Councillor Wells. We're just waiting for our clerk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, a question through you to Heidi, if that's all right. And that would be,
Yes.
since we're under a time frame problem, is it possible that we could ask for an extension for the present providers? To the present providers, I should ask.
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Wells, Council has already extended that contract at least once, potentially twice. I'd have to go back into my files and check. That is always Council's prerogative to do that. Staff would have to go back and take a look at what that recommendation